Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Ampire.
Hey, baby. Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday, everybody. What's going on? Callow, you spent your weekend running. Cool. Good for you. Very good. Staying in shape. Very good.
6 weeks out from marathon number 3. So, yeah.
Nice. Nice. I went to Atlanta over the weekend. I had a family event to attend, and I was in some area of it that I thought was really, really cool. I'd never been there before. It's called, which was like every time I've ever been to Atlanta, because I'm there because we're playing the Falcons. Like we stay downtown because the stadium's like right downtown, and we go to that disgusting hot dog place. This time, because we were at a family event, we were kind of out in, I don't know if suburbs is the right way to put it, but we were kind of outside the city. I'd never seen that part of Atlanta before, and it was very cool. I will say this though, I don't think I'd ever live there. I don't think I could. I would never. Like I go to all these places. I'm the person who goes there and then I hit Zillow to see what does it cost to live here, just to see. That place I don't even bother. Like the weather, the traffic, the bad hot dogs, like I'm out. Like I'm out. Like we had a great time. It's nice. I'm out. Like it's one of the few American cities that I go, no chance. I would never live there.
Yeah, comparatively to like DC too, like as you said, the traffic's bad, but the public transportation isn't there to like make up for it in some cases either. So like I'm good too. Like I'm not disparaging Atlanta. I just don't want to live there. It's nice to visit every now and then. That's it.
Yeah. Nice to visit every now and then. Probably like this year. All right. Let's see. What do we got? Oh, the Bengals paid up. They got forced to pay up. They paid up for both receivers. They got them both done. Jamar Chase gets the biggest contract ever for anyone that's not a quarterback. So he tops Myles Garrett. I did not have that going into this year, that the top two non-quarterbacks would be a player for the Browns and Bengals. I wouldn't have had that one, but that's what we got over the last couple of weeks. I think that one was spot on perfect. There's nothing you can do about it. He might be the best receiver in the NFL. He's 25 years old. You have to pay him, or you risk pissing off your great quarterback who you have no problem paying a couple of years. And T. Higgins has been just drawn out too long. You're either trading him or you're signing him. No more of this playing it out for the year. And they gave him a massive contract. So how about the Bengals shaking out the couch cushions? And this is all Joe Burrow, but like shaking it out and getting the money out there so he gets to keep his two teammates.
The Chase one, as you have said, like you just had to get that done. The sooner they got it done, the better. Like had they just done this last year, it would have been cheaper. I guess it would have been cheaper. T. Higgins is the one I think they're going to regret. Like having this much money sunk into those two wide receivers, like that was to me the one that you make the business decision and you trade him, or you let him try to play it out in the franchise tag. If that didn't work, then yeah, you go ahead and move him. I just think investing so much money into those two players in that one position, I think it's a mistake. Don't get me wrong. I like both players, but one of them you had to do. The other one you didn't really have to. You could have replaced them in the draft or, figured out a way to supplement that. So I think it's going to be a mistake for signing both, but don't get me wrong. They're making Joey B happy, which is honestly priority number one in all of this. So I can't knock that. I would have gone like Hendrickson over Higgins though, but they're paying 2 out of 3, which is honestly shocking that the Bengals are even doing that.
Yeah, well, I think they got bullied into it. Like Burrow went on essentially a media tour, especially at the Super Bowl, and went on anybody's show who would listen. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Pay up, guys." And it was a nice, subtle way of saying, "You're going to piss me off, and I'm your cash cow. And I'm the reason why people are selling out the stadium. And I'm the reason why you have a chance at the Super Bowl. And he's not wrong. So he's basically saying, you've got to keep my teammates around. For me, the Jamar Chase thing was a very easy solution. You just have to suck it up and do it. You're not going to find a player better than him. You just have to do it. There's nothing you can do about it. The other one, I'll hear out that argument. This feels a lot like Brandon Ayuk a year ago, where, I mean, like the 49ers probably sitting there going, we think you're really good. Everybody thinks you're really good. You're very tradable. We don't think you're Jamar Chase. And they had to make a decision. And honestly, that seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back out in San Francisco. They made that deal. The ownership was pissed they kept having to hand out money. They probably should have drawn a line on him. They probably should have traded him. Might be here now. That would have been possibility, or somewhere else, but there would have been a market for him. It would have avoided another massive contract. Then all of a sudden, like, I think they did it because they were just like, we got one more shot before we have a correction to our team. So just sign him. They gave him what he wanted. They regretted it immediately. They had a million injuries, including him, and now they're resetting. Debo's gone. I wouldn't be shocked if they found a deal for him at some point, if they can get out of that contract, that they would. They just traded a couple of their running backs are gone. Their best offensive lineman outside of Trent Williams just left via free agency. All these defensive players are gone. So they're totally resetting. I don't think the Bengals, they're in a similar spot other than they have Burrow. Burrow is not Purdy. Burrow's way better than Purdy. They have to make a choice about what they want to do. And I think at least, and I'll get to the other side of the ball because it applies to us, obviously, in a second. I think they kind of had to do this. I think this is different than Brandon Ayuk a year ago, where I would make the argument that the Niners should have traded him and gotten something for him before signing that contract to him, because they clearly didn't want to do it the whole time. They didn't want to do it. In Higgins and Chase's case, they're all in the primes of their careers. The window is not closing on Burrow right now. Chase is only 25. These guys basically got each other's backs the whole time. I actually think it was the right thing to do. I agree it's too much money put into one position group, but I think that organization needed to show its star quarterback they are committed to trying to win. And even if the T. Higgins thing in the end is not the exact right thing to do, they did do that today. So I actually think on this case where Higgins is Ayuk to me, really good player, not Jamar Chase, not Justin Jefferson, but in this case, I understood why they did it. And honestly, similarly, had they done this a year ago, the number that he got wouldn't be what he got today. So the mistake that they made was waiting to do this now.
Yeah, I mean, my bigger drawback, and I'm with you, I agree on like the tier system there. My bigger drawback, though, is why were the Bengals so bad last year? It was their defense. Their offense wasn't the problem. And so you're reinvesting into the offense. You're probably trading Trey Hendrickson, and you're probably not investing more on that side of the ball. It just looks like you're running it back at the same thing. I get it, though. You're investing on that side. You're making Joe happy. You're making Chase happy. You're making Higgins happy. They made that decision. They have to lie with it. It's essentially where I'm landing here. I'm not saying it was like a terrible decision. I would have just done something else is what I'm getting at here.
So how this all applies to us is everyone is just assuming, because they're typically a cheap organization. They're typically an organization that doesn't want to pay that kind of money to all these different players, that because they divvied it out to Chase and Higgins, and I agree that those were two places that they should have put their money into, Chase and Higgins, that they won't pay Trey Hendrickson now. And I'm not sure that I totally buy that that's the case. And I'm willing to see and wait to find out if that's really the case. My understanding of it was they actually don't want to trade him, that they made it very difficult to trade him. I think they wanted him to go out there and see that he's not going to get the money he thinks he's going to get because of his age, and that nobody perceives him as Myles Garrett, even though everyone thinks he's really, really good. Would somebody top $30 million a year for him? Maybe. We'd probably have to ask Josh Harris and Adam Peters, would you pay him 30 plus if you can get the trade done? And then secondarily, the Bengals want what sounds like something back that they wouldn't get. But now that they've done this, now the question is whether they would do it again for Hendrickson, because he was the third player that Burrow stumped for He didn't say, I just want my receivers back. He said he wants him back too. I thought it was interesting they did both of them basically on the same day, made this big announcement, and now I'm waiting for, do you hear crickets about Hendrickson, or do you hear they're moving on to try to get him settled too? And I'm not sure which way that's going to go. I will say this up front. For everyone who just assumes that because they paid the other two, they can't pay him, the cap room actually is lower on the other two. They can do it. It's a decision of whether they choose to do it and whether their ownership is willing to pay a third very large signing bonus at the same time. It has nothing to do with cap space. It has everything to do with, do they want to give out this amount of cash to 3 different people in the same offseason? That's a decision they have to make, and we'll find out soon.
No, exactly right. I will say this too, like, the biggest argument for the 2 wide receivers over Hendrickson is that they're 25 and 26.
That's right.
24 and 25. Like, Hendrickson is 30 years old. I do see that as the biggest counterpoint to why you go and sign those two as opposed to him, because we also know, like, any position in football, edge rusher, same thing. Like, they could get old fast, and all of a sudden you're stuck with a fat contract that is not producing. I get it with that one. I'm with you on this one too, though, that I think everyone kind of just assumed because it's the Bengals, could you see them giving out 3 big contracts? Like,
No.
the answer is no. You couldn't see them giving out 1 big contract, honestly. So the fact that they might do 3, I just think, it's a little far-fetched to think they're going to do that much in one offseason.
My guess was all along, you got to pay Chase. There's just no way around that. Yeah. Like, Burrow would ask for a trade. Like, you can't. He's too good. You have to keep him. He's 25. There's no reason not to pay him. Higgins, I thought they were going to trade because they're going to pay Chase and then say, we'll draft Higgins' replacement and we're going to get something pretty good in return for him because there's going to be a market for him. And then Hendrickson, I thought, would be gone. Now that they've done both, this is just my guess and gut now. I think they're going to trade Hendrickson now. That now I think they're going to do it. And I think they're going to say this to Burrow. This is what I think they're going to say. The defense isn't very good right now. The defense is the one that needs to be rebooted. You need to understand the offense is, that's how we're going to win here. We gave you your guys. You're going to have the type of season you had a year ago moving forward to have real shots to win. We're going to put a lot of resources into the draft to replace people. And as we know, sitting at 29, needing an edge rusher, it is very possible that very, very good options are going to be there for us at 29, which means because they didn't make the playoffs, very, very good options at that position are going to be there even earlier in the draft. So my gut says it has nothing to do with their cap or the money they put out. The money they put out, it does. My gut says they're going to walk away from this one because he's 30, because he's not in the prime of his career, because they can get something in return for him, and because they already have, at least in their own minds, satisfied Burrow to show him we are willing to pay for people. We're just not willing to pay for everybody. And this feels a little bit like, used to make this argument, we could have Juan Soto and suck, or we could not have Juan Soto and suck. And on that side of the ball, they could have Trey Hendrickson and probably not be that good, or they could not have Trey Hendrickson and probably not be that good and save a lot of money. So I think the signing of Chase and Higgins signals to me that they will trade Trey Hendrickson because they don't want to outlay money to a 30-year-old on the side of the ball that isn't good enough to be a top 10 defense until they get more personnel. And I think that they're going to go heavy in the draft on defense and try to reload fast with young players.
Well, and look how everyone else that has signed the quarterback or invested so much money in the offense, how they've handled the defense. The Chiefs have done the same thing, right? Like, they signed Chris Jones. Outside of that, not too much money invested in that defense. They draft guys, or they say to Mahomes, we're going to draft you a running back or a wide receiver in the first round, then invest in all these other positions. Like, they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire years and years ago. That one didn't work out. But then they drafted Xavier Worthy last year as well. Like, the way they've done it is kind of how you follow the blueprint. You have the quarterback figured out, start investing in the other parts of the team with the draft picks, invest in, 1 or 2 other pieces, but don't go crazy here. The Bengals are going to have to do the exact same things. Go look at the Ravens too. Ravens had to do the exact same thing. They haven't had a huge signing on defense since Lamar got that contract extension. They've done it by free agency and a couple of trades and, moves here and there, but it's nothing crazy. Like, once you have that quarterback, contract on your books, you got to get creative. That's simply what it is. And the fact that the Bengals are going, though, we're not even going to be creative. We're just going to sign the 2 wide receivers that you want and call it a day. Now you have to kind of grin and bear what we're about to do with the defense and how we end up getting there.
Being like, I think Joe Burrow made this happen. Like, I think they'd be crazy not to sign Chase, but to do both of them says to me that they were respecting the wishes of the quarterback, because he's the one that publicly basically shamed them into getting something done. At this point, if they said to him, we are moving on from Trey Hendrickson, I don't think he has a huge complaint. He could sit there and stump for them and try to do it, but business is business, and there are limits, and you can't sign everybody. Any team will tell you that. You can't sign everybody. And the timing, it was right to keep these receivers together. It's kind of not right to keep him there. At 30, on a side of the ball that needs to be revamped, where you've already put all of your money and assets into offense, it is time for them probably to move him. So that's why I think this news over the weekend, it's not that they can't do it. They can. And unless Burrow continues to stump for them having to do this, then, and if he backs off, or he may not even talk about it anymore, because he actually, I think it was really notable he did it, because he notoriously is actually very quiet. He doesn't really say a lot about anything, but he showed up on purpose at the Super Bowl to basically say, I don't want to lose this team around me. Don't leave me alone on some island. I'm not going to say this out loud, but what I'm basically telling you is I'm not going to want to be here if this is how you're going to conduct business. So they did what they did. This, to me, in my gut, says it makes it more likely they'll be more open to a trade for Hendrickson. What that looks like and what they want, I don't know. And maybe this one does involve not just draft picks, because it seems like what they're asking for, nobody really wants to give them because you got to pay them. But maybe they would be more open to a player being attached to a deal that's got not a lot of money attached to them, that helps them out a little bit. And I don't know who comes to mind for me from here that fits that bill, but maybe that and a draft pick gets something done for him somewhere. And I'd like to know who they eye on our roster that might help them, because maybe we do have a couple position groups where that we are flexible enough to talk about something like that, because I still don't believe that Adam Peters is going to be willing to give up his first round pick for him. But if you come to us and you say you want the second, or you say you want the fourth and a player, well, we might have a conversation about something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put that off the table, especially with how they need to upgrade at that position just so badly, right? Like you and I have talked about it. They've signed some depth guys, but it seems like there's a big hole at that position group too. So I wouldn't rule that out. I just don't know who that player is without getting worse. You know, I think there's that potential. So that's the one side of it. By the way, to your point on Burrow too, Burrow had to come out and say all that stuff as well, mainly just because he needs to be on record to say it. So if they weren't going to sign those guys, that he could come out years later and go, I've been telling you guys this for years. You need to sign these guys. Well, and they potentially don't. So I do think like that was the smart thing by him and his agent.
Yeah, he got in front of it. I think he was telling the fans, I'm demanding this team to do better. Yeah. And I'm just telling you up front, if they don't, the groundwork is laid for, and this is why I would leave, right? Like, that's what it is.
Yeah, but for the Commanders to make that move for Hendrickson, I just don't know where that position group is. And like I said, I don't want to get worse, obviously. But at the same time, this is a position that they clearly need, like, more than just about any other position on the roster, I think. So if it has to,
playmaker. I will say this, like, they've done a really good job deepening the entire position group outside of, and I need to see it to believe it, that Kinlaw is an adequate replacement for John Allen, because I don't want to be unfair to John. John has been very good here, or was very good here in his career. He wasn't dominant like he was a few years ago, the last couple of years, and he had a lot of injuries, but I kind of knew what I was getting week to week with him, and he was a very, very good player. Minnesota got a very good player. Kinlaw has not had a season like that once. I'm open to believing that we haven't seen the best of him, and I trust Peters in this group because they know him. They're like, listen, we drafted him. He's a freak. We know what he can do. He had a lot of injuries his first few years. Things went sideways. He ended up going to the Jets. That was ridiculous a year ago. And they're switching coaches in the middle of the year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just trust us on this one. And so I do. I just have to trust them on this one, that he will be an adequate replacement to John Allen, if not at least athletically an upgrade. But we'll see. We'll see about that. As I look across the board, though, the group is extremely deep. I loved the Dietrich Wise addition. I think he's a great rotational piece for a very cheap amount of money. Let's see year 2, Johnny Newton. Deron Payne is back. It's going to be a big-time show-me year for him, or we're going to have weird conversations about him next year, just like we do with Alec, because he's going to be coming up on a last year. They can't do anything this year, but next year, they can look at his contract the way they looked at John's and make some decisions about him. Dorrance Armstrong's a very solid, good player, but he's not going to get a lot of sacks. He'll have his moments here or there. And then they went across the board and signed all of these depth players. Sheldon Day is back. Jalen Holmes was just re-signed. This guy, Jacob Martin, was just brought in. Jalen Moore, Cleveland Farrell was brought back. They actually have too many players. The competition at that position group is going to be fierce, actually, this summer. There's going to be a veteran or two that are going to get cut because they don't have room to keep everybody. So it's all there in terms of depth. But I still, unless it's Kinlaw, believe they're missing a playmaker. And that's why this continues, I think, to still, even though they're very deep at this position group now, I still think they have to think, don't we need the guy who can change games? And to me, if that's at least a salary overpay of Hendrickson, it's probably worth it, considering what they're doing. They firmly believe, and I agree with them off of what they did a year ago, they are in a window where they can compete for championships. I think you need a playmaker on defense to make that actually happen. I'm not like I've said this about the offense too. You have to get playmakers. They got Deebo Samuel. They haven't gotten a second one yet. Will it come at running back through the draft? Maybe. Will it come with a secondary wide receiver that they bring in because there's still a lot of names that are available? Maybe. And on the defensive side of the ball, you look and you go, I like all these moves they're making. Jonathan Jones is an upgrade at corner from what they had. Their corner group looks way better than it did a year ago. They are very deep on the defensive line. However, I still don't see that guy who flips games upside down. It could be a defensive end. It could be an edge rusher. It could be a corner. It could be a safety sometimes. But who is it? I haven't seen it yet. So that's why I still think they're in the market here. But I think the price has to be right. They're not giving them their first-round pick. It's just not happening, I don't think.
No, I mean, and I think if we've seen anything, it's Peters likes his first and second-round picks this year. Like, he actually does want to keep those picks in line to get those potential starters onto this defense, right? Like, if there's anything, it's this year he wants those 2 picks to make the roster, to at least build up the depth that wherever he needs to build said depth. In terms of playmakers too, like, I would say hopefully maybe Mikey Sanders still is emerging as that. Like, it started to happen at the end of last year where he was getting some turnover, stuff like that. But you can always rely on a corner because then they could just stop throwing his way. So I think that's one that like might potentially emerge. But having your slot corner be the playmaker is probably not the best way to go in terms of building a roster up. So like, I get it with that one. The other thing I would say is to your original point of all the tackles they've signed and all the defensive linemen they've signed, and with Deron Payne, I would go to his agent and just go, if your guy doesn't perform this year, like, the writing's on the wall for next year. And maybe that motivates him to play a little bit better because his best season was that contract year. Like, bar none, like, period. His best season was that contract year where then they gave him the extension and he hasn't been as good since. I would go to him. I would go to his agent early and just go, we don't see it here unless he ends up being really, really good this next year.
I agree. We'll see. They did lose Dante Fowler. He went back to Dallas on a 1-year deal. He clearly got pissed early in free agency. I guess they weren't having good conversations because he publicized it. You know, he went on Twitter and basically said that they went the wrong way. Here's what I want to say about him. I thought he had a very good year. Obviously, a double-digit sack year for them. I remember now, and when we would get ready to play him when he was in Dallas previously, they didn't use him the way that Washington did. Washington had to use him probably a lot more than they probably even envisioned and wanted to because he was their best option on the edge. But he's not an edge setter. He's a pass rusher. He reminds me a lot of Hassan Reddick signing with Tampa Bay, or Azeez Ojulari, who's out there. Like, I think he's very similar. He's a younger version of Dante Fowler. He's a very good, accomplished pass rusher. But you're not going to stick him out there on defensive end. You're going to get run on. And he ended up not playing a ton in the NFC Championship game because I think they knew they had to be more stout on the edge of the line with Saquon Barkley and the rush offense that they're facing. And the reality is, I think Dante is a really, really, really good specialist. And if you have a really good edge setting line, then you can bring someone like this in and use him in the right positions and timing and downs. And I think he was, I don't want to say miscast. I just think they asked him to do more than he's capable of. He's not a run stopper. And they have clearly decided this is not happening again to us. And we generated a lot of sacks with him, over 10. We think we can get that again from other players, but we need to be better up front against the run. And that's the only reason why I think he's not here. I don't think it's an indictment of him. I just think we envision you more as a specialist and a third down specialist. And if you really think about your skill set, that is what you're best at. It's on first and second down when we play run teams that we have problems. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit because I think I saw like he deleted the tweet when he was going off. Well, I think it was like last Sunday when he was firing off the tweets where basically said like, oh, I got 10.5 sacks playing less than other defensive ends. And everybody was like, yeah, like, that's why they don't want to give you all this money, because you are a specialist at this point. Like you played yourself. Like I think his agent probably said, hey, take that one down.
Yes.
And that's the one that he kind of played himself into. And that's the one where I went, yeah, dude, like you were good for us. We used you a lot. But at the same time, your best scenario was being a pass rusher. And that was essentially it.
It's interesting. Like for Montez Sweat, the whole thing was, look, dude, you just got to finish more plays. Like, we know you're really good. We trust you on the edge, but you don't end up getting a lot of sacks. Why is that? In Fowler's case, he's like, I got a lot of sacks. Isn't that worth a lot of money? Yeah. And it's, well, you're actually a liability on first and second down against good run teams. And that's why we see you that way. And that's why he got a 1-year deal and not some big deal somewhere else, because everyone recognizes what he is. He's across from Micah Parsons, he's a dangerous, dangerous player. And he was a dangerous player for us too. It's just the liability against the run, and that's all it was. I like Dante, too. He's a very good guy. I like dealing with him in the locker room last year. All right, last one real quick. There was more. This is an underrated signing, too. I've been saying this all offseason. They had to get depth on the offensive line, not just maybe some starters, which they clearly answered with bringing Tunsil in. They had to get depth up on the offensive line. This is a classic. Nate Herbig is not old, but he's been hurt the last couple of years. So they're taking a swing at a guy who could be a spot starter for them. Like, remember, I don't know when Sam Cosmi's going to play. It's not going to be during minicamp or potentially not at the start of training camp. I'm very interested to get an update on him. Like, when do they think he'll be back? But remember, he tore his ACL in the playoffs. So this could be 8, 9, 10 months. Like, it might be October before he plays again. And who knows if he's fully healthy. They have to account for that going into the season. So they get Tunsil. That slides Coleman somewhere. I think it's right tackle, but I'm not totally sure. That still could be Andrew Wiley. The renegotiation with Wiley screamed to me, you're our swing tackle now that Lucas isn't here, but you might play guard and you might play some tackle and you'll probably play, and we'll incentivize you if that ends up happening. That's what I think it'll be. Or Coleman could be a guard. But this signing said to me, if this guy's healthy, he could be the spot starter at right guard until Cosby comes back. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, especially looking at his history too. Like, he started games for the Eagles, started games for the Steelers in his career. Like, those are two franchises that I feel pretty good about, a guy just coming over and starting some games in some injury riddled seasons, or coming in and just getting some playing time. Like, I think I saw one of the stats where he didn't start a lot of games, but he played in a lot of games. So he was coming in every now and then, either to be the sixth lineman or to spot somebody. This is kind of like the perfect signing, I think, to supplement Cosby. I mean, if that's the plan, that's what it sounds like. But when I saw that he had started up to like 11 games with one of those teams, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, the guy can at least play, and he's played every single year except last year. He had a torn rotator cuff, I think, was his injury in training camp. Other than that, like, guy seemed like a pretty good depth lineman. I like this signing.
Yeah, if they had their full complement of draft picks, and maybe they get some back if they trade back, I would argue that another interior offensive lineman, because you can get good ones in the second round, that could be a priority pick for them. And then, while I know they're not looking ahead to 2026, if you get everybody healthy, you've got Tunsil, whoever this guard is, Biotish, Cosby, Coleman. You could all of a sudden have a very, very strong offensive line, assuming it goes well with this draft pick, extremely well. So, like, we'll see. Like we'll see what they do here, but I understood this signing and I've been screaming for this too. They needed depth on the D line, they depth on the offensive line badly, and they seem to be going out of their way to address it. All right, we'll be right back. Bram Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
You may get a little excited when you shop at Burlington.
What a low price! You see that? They have my favorite brand! It's like a whole new Burlington! I can buy two! Woo!
I'm saving so much! Yeah!
Burlington saves you up to 60% off other retailers' prices every day. Will it be the low prices or the great brands? You'll love the deals. You'll love Burlington. I told you so.
All right, welcome back. We're still waiting on Aaron. What's Aaron going to do? When is Aaron going to emerge from whatever personal reflective period he's in now to tell us what his answer is? Because I don't believe the reporting on any of it. Like, of all the things he says, and many of which I don't believe, or he's just fooling himself into saying things that he knows aren't true or doesn't know aren't true, I do believe he doesn't speak to the reporters because none of them seem to have accurate information about him. So he talks to McAfee, but he doesn't talk to Rossini or Schefter or Rappaport. Like, I believe he doesn't talk to any of them because when he says who's your source, because it's not me, I actually believe him about that. And this is why I don't think we know what he's going to do. Pittsburgh hasn't jumped at a quarterback. The Giants haven't jumped at the quarterback. And Minnesota's in a weird spot right now. And all of them are obvious potential spots for him to go. So we sit back and we wait on Aaron to emerge from the clouds and decree what he will do for 2025.
This is the time where he goes on the Blue of Earth podcast, Bram. Come on now.
His timeline is undefeated. For really any major star, his timeline's undefeated. Between the clay-eating girlfriend, Danica Patrick, Blue of Earth, like going to the Jets, having it go as ridiculously badly as it did. Like it's his last 5 years are unmatched for a Hall of Fame player.
You said clay-eating girlfriend. That is Shailene Woodley, like maybe the most popular one out of all three of them. I just want to put the name out there just because it wasn't just some nobody. But yes, he has maybe the weirdest timeline. And what I find just the weirdest about all of it now is that guy, I don't want to say he was like angry at Brett Favre, but he did kind of go out of his way to be like, that guy never helped me. He never mentored me. And I totally understand that, like, given Aaron or any quarterback aside. But now he has gone to the team that Brett went with, that he was unsuccessful with. And now it's hinging on the next team that Brett Favre also went to. Like, for a guy that, like, I don't know, pays attention to everything that he does, that he could possibly be the same quarterback that won a Super Bowl in Green Bay, went to New York and failed, and then possibly go to Minnesota. That's weird, man. Like,
it is weird.
I don't know, like, how else to explain it. That's weird for a guy that seemingly pays attention to everything and tries not to do that. I don't know. I got weird vibes all over it. That's all I'm saying.
So, like, it feels like, but because he's not talking to anybody, I don't know. It does feel like he'd like to go to Minnesota.
Yeah.
And of the three choices, if you are looking at the teams and you are looking at recent history where Minnesota had the record they had with the team that they had, it's hard not to look at that and go, that would be the right place to go. Right. So if you're just being logical about it for a minute, like put aside all the weird Favre tracking, you could be in the division again with Green Bay, which I'm sure on some level would be fun for him to do. If you just put all that aside, if you look at the opportunity in front of you, it's the best of the three. In my opinion, they've done God, I was laughing at them a couple of years ago. I didn't know what they were doing. They have suddenly put together a very strong roster. Like maybe later this week I'll do this, of teams that had good first weeks in free agency, et cetera. They're up there. They're top 5 between getting John Allen and Hargrave. If he's healthy, boy, did they fortify the middle of their defensive line. They just got Jordan Mason from the 49ers. So they just re-signed Aaron Jones. That's a hell of a two-headed monster all of a sudden with the receivers that they have. They already came in with a really good offense. I think it had a lot to do with why Darnold had such a big year last year. They re-signed their own with Byron Murphy. Like they look formidable. So I think for them, because it sounds like they have to make this decision too. Kevin O'Connell has to weigh, is this guy going to blow us up or take us over the top? And that's a really, really tough decision because it could go either way. They have a really good team that won 14 games a year ago that got better on paper over the last couple of weeks. They're a quarterback away. Only they know how healthy J.J. McCarthy is, and I assume how ready they think he actually is for this, because, frankly, that could blow them up if they go in that direction, and he's either not ready or not healthy, and then they're turning to some backup off-the-street quarterback, and you know how that's going to go. You're not going to win a Super Bowl that way.
Yeah, I think
Rodgers. So with all that said, I actually think the right answer is for them to sign him for 1 year. If he's willing to sign for 1 year to get McCarthy healthy and ready for 2026, and tell Aaron, like, here's your 1 year run with a Ferrari. You've got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and really good running backs and a really good line. And we think a defense that not only overachieved, but we put better people than a year ago. We can win here. And that's how I would look at it. I would sign him if I were them for 1 year. I don't know what he wants. That's what I would do, because I would be scared to throw McCarthy out there off of the injuries and not having seen him play with the opportunity that's in front of him. And for all the people who go, you're going to piss him off, he's on a rookie contract, and I don't care. He's got 3 years left on that rookie contract after this year. He'll get over it because he will play eventually.
I think the other side of this, like, it mainly lies with, do you want to hand this team over to a rookie quarterback in JJ? And I think that's a very hard decision to do, because not every rookie is Jaden Daniels, is CJ Stroud, right? Like, I don't think JJ falls into that category. At the same time, too, I would go to Aaron and go, we're going to give you a 1 year contract. At the same time, if we need to bench you, don't go crazy, because we're going to probably have to turn back to you at some point anyways, right? Like, I always point to that Peyton Manning run with the Broncos, right? Where that last year in Denver, he looked like a shell of himself, right? And everybody was like, how much can they keep doing it? And they didn't. And who did they end up going to in the end? Was it Osweiler? Was it Osweiler that was on that roster? Mm-hmm. They went to him for a couple of games, then went back to him, and they win a Super Bowl anyways, right? Like, so I would go to Rodgers and just say, we need you to ebb and flow with this season no matter what happens, but we're probably going to have to turn to you at some point. I would say this too. I think it's a little bit of a psychological thing with Rodgers too, because you're looking at all the other teams in that division, and the Packers are going, oh crap, he's going to want to beat us really bad. And then the Lions and the Bears are both going, crap, that guy had our number for however many years. Like, he even jokes about how he owns these two franchises. Like, there's a little bit of that psychological thing going with Minnesota too. I would not blame them if they go the Aaron Rodgers route, simply because it is tough to hand it over to a rookie in JJ.
That division's a juggernaut too. That's the other thing.
Yep.
If you're Minnesota and you have the team that you have there, and you look at Jordan Love, Caleb Williams now with Ben Johnson and all the improvements that they did, and Detroit, even though they lost their coaching staff, they're formidable. It's still the number one offense in the league that didn't lose anybody on that side of the ball. They got to, without Ben Johnson, they just have to be better. That's a formidable division. Do you really take a chance with an unproven quarterback, even if you're high on him? I don't know. The other thing that's interesting now, did you see the Sam Darnold contract?
No.
So it was, billed as a 3-year, $100 million deal about. The first year is like 30-something million, 37, almost 40 million. It's guaranteed. The second year isn't. In fact, they have to make a decision on him within a week after the Super Bowl. It's kind of like what Derek Carr had a couple years ago when they let him go early because they didn't want to pay a guarantee and let him get ahead of free agency, and they ended up going to the Saints. Similar thing in here. So this reads as if this doesn't go well, it's a 1-year deal, and Seattle's completely out of it. So, which makes me go, okay, if that's what it was, and we're sitting there talking about what Minnesota should do, if that's all he wanted, why didn't Minnesota do that? Like, that doesn't even, now it doesn't even compute. Like, he gave him what I thought was a 3-year, $100 million deal. As it turns out, it's really a 1-year deal with an option for a second year and then an option for a third, but you can easily get out of any of it after this year. Why didn't Minnesota do that?
I felt this way the whole time, that Minnesota should have been out of that business because of how he played at the end of the season, that you weren't going to win a Super Bowl with him, that maybe you could have pulled the wool over the eyes for another 13, 14 weeks, but they weren't going to win a Super Bowl with him. I was fine with them moving on. So it tells me that Minnesota wasn't as interested, maybe ever, to sign him at all. And I think that's okay, especially with a rookie quarterback waiting in the wings. Like, I always thought this decision was fine. Like, I didn't want Darnold back in Minnesota. I thought they had better options in. You at least roll the dice with JJ over him because I think maybe he has a good rookie season. Maybe you can make a championship run with him. I don't know. I was fine with this. So when I didn't know that was the deal, but it tells me too, he didn't have as much interest as, as previously thought.
All right, last one is Kirk Cousins. There was another clause that kicked in on his contract, so he gets all this more guaranteed money. I still think he's getting traded. I think he's the one where everyone's waiting for, okay, like, what does Rodgers do? And I think once Rodgers is out of the way, in all of this, there's part of me that argues he should be traded back to Minnesota. Yeah. But like he performed really well there. The team's at a different spot than they were. He knows the offense. I don't know. That one seems to make a little bit of sense. Just go back and play out the last year of this contract there.
I think Minnesota, I've been circling San Fran too. Like, if the San Fran talks with Purdy go south and they decide to trade him because they don't want to pay him, is that a potential landing spot for Cousins? And maybe Atlanta eats some of the salary. They get a better draft pick or a player back or something like that. Yeah, like, I'm not surprised Atlanta's holding on here. They know that they've got a quarterback here where the potential is still there to be a very good starter in this league. I'm not surprised they didn't just cut him right away. You also are going to get whatever team needs him is going to be very desperate, and you're probably going to get a little bit more than had you just cut him or tried to trade him right now.
I'm still waiting on the Giants too. I feel like they're going to do something nuts. I don't know what it is, but I feel like they're going to do something nuts, and I'm waiting for it to happen. All right, we'll be right back. Very much the show is ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
I'm ready for my life to change.
ABC Sundays, American Idol is all new.
Give it your all. Good luck. Come out with the golden ticket.
Let's hear it.
This is a man's world.
I've never seen anything like it.
And a new chapter begins.
We're going to Hollywood.
Carrie Underwood joins Lionel Richie, Luke Bryan, and Ryan Seacrest on American Idol. New Sundays, 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Hey, welcome back. Brackets are out, playa. Maryland gets Grand Canyon in Seattle. Thanks. Their next game would either be, if they were to win this, and I'm not going to pretend I know anything about Grand Canyon and what that looks like, they would play either Memphis or Colorado State. Colorado State is red hot, and they wouldn't have made the tournament had they not won their conference tournament, but they did, and they've won like 10 in a row, so they're red hot. Memphis apparently is very, very good, but one of their best players has been injured. So we'll have to see how that kind of plays out. That reads to me that the road is actually wide open for Maryland to get to the Sweet 16. I don't know if you saw how their game ended the other day. They lost on would be that is a March miracle that they lost on, unfortunately. They were out-rebounded something like 48-20 or something like some kind of crazy number against Michigan. So I guess they deserve to lose after something like that. But the road for them looks pretty good, at least now. I mean, granted, they got to go across the country, but the road looks pretty good to get to the second weekend.
Is it something crazy, too? Like, Maryland's last, 6 losses have all been last-second crazy shots, too.
Yes.
That's
losing at the buzzer. Yes.
That's, to me, a great sign. That you're losing games like that every single time. It's taking these miracle type shots. So hopefully it just means you're ready to go right now where it is an elimination game and that you don't get yourself in that situation. Or when you do, you know how to play a little bit tighter. I always say this too. Why does Maryland get screwed when they get sent to the West Coast every single time lately? Why are they going to Seattle? I know there's no rhyme or reason, but come on, help them out one time here.
It always used to be Duke and North Carolina would get the East or the Midwest.
Yes.
And so Maryland, because they were third place in the ACC, but would have a high seed, would get screwed, and they would just go there. But the brackets are manufactured now in a way where they play you regionally, no matter which portion of the bracket you're in. So I kind of don't understand why they ended up in Seattle. They could have been regionally closer, but they got screwed. My school, AU, got totally punished. They have to play a first 4 game, which when I was leaving, I went to the championship game last week. And when I went to Bender, everyone was saying that they expected them to end up in it. So they're going to play Mount St. Mary's in Dayton. So that's interesting. This is a semi-local matchup with one another. If they were to win that, they have to go to Raleigh to play Duke. Thanks.
Buzzsaw that one. Yep.
Yeah. I got a couple of friends were like, do you want a road trip to Raleigh on Friday? And thankfully, I can't go because we have all this family in town. I do not want to see, they've had a great year. And I don't know, maybe it'll surprise me, but I really don't want to see them. It was the last team I wanted to see them play. I was like, oh, God. Duke in the first round of the tournament against a 16 seed. Final score 92-50. It's just I want in Raleigh, oh my God, it's the worst. Maryland gets sent to Seattle. Duke gets to play 20 minutes from their campus. It sucks. It totally sucks.
A part of you doesn't want to see Cooper Flagg just throw down against American. I don't know.
Is he even going to play against them?
I would think so. Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe AU will shock the world. That'd be incredible. And then if I didn't go, I'll be like, you're an idiot. You didn't go. Right. Real quick to George Mason. You guys got snubbed. I know what kind of season you guys had. You tied for the regular season conference championship, an amazing record. You lost a close game to a team that was going to be in the tournament, I think, either way. So I think you should have been in either way. So you got snubbed. So shout out George Mason for getting snubbed. All right, real quick. Caps rout the Sharks over the weekend. Ovi is now 8 away from the breaking the record of Wayne Gretzky. So that was a nice ending to the road trip. They had a clunker in LA and then turned around and just routed those dudes.
Yeah, I was all over this one. The Sharks are just one of the worst teams in hockey. They have the worst comeback record in the league. So when the Caps went up 2-0, I knew this game was pretty much over with. It was going to be a matter of how Ovi scored, not when. So he gets his 1. And this chase is getting tight now. We're going to be counting this down. I know he's going to really want to get this done before the summer, but we officially, we can see the end of the runway here. It's going to be tight here. I will say this too, and I say this in the nicest way possible. You and I talk about Ovechkin a lot over the years, but he hasn't looked the same on this West Coast trip either. He hasn't been moving the same a little bit. So I don't know if that was being on the West Coast, not being at home, whatever, but they need a little bit more out of him in general. So let's see what happens coming back home this week. I believe they get the Red Wings on Tuesday. I'm pretty sure that's who they get on Tuesday. So that's another bad team that's out of it or fighting for a wild card spot. Hopefully you can take care of business against them. But yeah, the runway, we can see it here. So that great chase, 8 to go. Hopefully he gets it done.
All right, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow. Brave Buster Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.